What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to YGOPD, your Yu-Gi-Oh! Professional Development, and I am back to do a bit of a follow-up by popular request on the Traptrix build that I've been showcasing that utilizes Ancient Fairy Dragon as a big combo piece. Had a lot of people asking for a little bit of a guide, some combo examples, some more utility on how this is used, so I wanted to go ahead and do that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the math of the deck, the utility, the combos, the examples, how it interacts, and then do another test hand to just kind of showcase that a little bit more in depth. But of course, before I start, I want to shout out all of our new public subs of the channel: Quinn, Powerplay, Gooseman, Rom, Vamp Koala, Giant, Nexi, JJ, Guillermo, Blaze, Don, Victor, Matt, and Ezekiel. Thank you all so much for joining. It really does mean a lot. We are on the road to 1K. We are really close. Liking, subbing, commenting, engaging, all of that really does help. It means a lot. I have some really cool stuff planned for when we hit 1K, so please continue to support the channel. It really does mean a lot. But with all that said, I want to make sure we give as much time to the deck as possible, so we'll go ahead and hop into it and start a little bit with the math around the deck. Okay, starting with the math. If you've been with this channel for a while, you know math is a big kind of background for me. I had taught math before, and I always like when I can abuse that type of probability and all that good stuff to really make a deck perform as well as possible. That's really where I lean into it, and I think I do well in my deck building. So I wanted to talk about the build. If you've not seen that yet, again, I will link the deck profile in the description below. Feel free to check that out. It should be one of the most recent videos on the channel just from last week. Starting off with the Traptrix names, again, I am a big fan, like I said, of leveraging math. We have 14 Traptrix names in our 40 card deck. That just means 14 is always the magic number. You've heard me talk about that a lot, especially for 40 card builds. That's what gets you a 90% chance of seeing at least one of those 14 names in that pile of 14. You want one of those. That's the way you want to go in a 40 card deck. We play 14 Traptrix names, normal summons. That's how you're going to get it. Yes, that's a little bit high, but you have to remember the Traptrix deck is a little bit different, right? Those normal summons all lead into something else. Mantis gives you an extender. Mermelio gives you an extender. Arachnocampa is an extender. Pudica gives you a field spell, which is an extender. So you have so many normal summons that just get you into an extra step, so it's not that big of a deal. But that's where we land with the 90% chance of seeing those names. For extenders, when I talk about that, I'm considering the Shade Brigadines, the Holuteas, the Parallel Exceeds, the field spell for the Traptrix engine, the Parallel Exceeds, right? The Arachnocampas, my Synchro engine, which is the Ravine, the Destrudo, and the Fairy Ant, like I'd mentioned before. All those add up to 15. So you have a 92% chance of seeing at least one of those. So again, you're over 90% chance of seeing a Traptrix name plus something else that's an extender that lets you play. So no matter what, this deck is really living and breathing in 2-card combos right now. You're going to have the chance to see that no matter what, which is really powerful. If you want to throw Prosperity in the mix, you get closer to that 95% chance of seeing either that Traptrix name or that extender. The other good thing about this is when you build your deck to have that 14 or 15 card piles for either starters or extenders, when you Prosperity, if you don't see any of those and you look for 6, you're still going to have another 96 to 97% chance of seeing one of those. If you already saw one of those names, then you still have about a 95% chance of seeing an extra name. So if you had those 14 starters, you saw one Traptrix name, and you still want to see one of those 13 more off another 6 from Prosperity, you got about 95% chance of still hitting one of those, which is really good. So again, I say all that to say the deck is built in a way that utilizes the math, that utilizes the probability, so that your hands aren't bad, that you have the ability to play as much as possible, as often as you can. So that's a bit about the math behind the deck. What I'm going to go ahead and do is hop into a bit about the utility, different types of combos, and things like that related to specifically the Ancient Fairy Dragon and Synchro engine piece. Okay, I have a lot of different examples, and I thought it would be best just to showcase them with physical cards here on the mat. Again, not all of these are going to be perfect, but I want them to just showcase to you how in different random scenarios where a regular Traptrix build that may not have these engines might fall a little short, that you can still utilize this to kind of combo and keep moving forward, or at least work your way to some disruptions. The first example I have here is Pudica plus Destrudo. Pudica is a way to get you to a field spell and also happens to be a plant. So what you typically do is normal summon the Pudica, and I'll zoom out just a little bit so you can see that well. You'll normal summon the Pudica, use its effect to get that field spell, and then from there you can special Destrudo, synchro these two off. The Pudica is going to go in the grave. I'm just going to set that here so you can see it. The Destrudo would normally go to the bottom of the deck, so we'll put that out of the way after we synchro with the Pudica, and those two go away to make a copy of Ancient Fairy Dragon. Yep, that's pretty standard. That's pretty straightforward. We'll leave the Pudica here just so it's a little bit visible. There's not a lot to be said here. Yes, again, you're going to have two other cards to play with in your hand and to work with. But the cool thing about this is you can Ancient Fairy Dragon pop the field spell, gain a little bit of life back, and then you can search your Therian Disc Coliseum. So you'll go ahead and get that field spell from your deck to your hand. And then when you activate that, that gives you access to Lily. Then you can simply special the Lily, use the Lily's effect to equip the Pudica, then resend the Pudica to then get a copy of Therian Cross. So in a hand that might be awkward, that you don't have access to any disruption at all, this still is a way to get you there. And in worst case scenario, Ancient Fairy Dragon is another special summon from your hand that I will talk about in just a little bit. But that's a basic example where if you have a really awkward hand but you need to get some type of disruption on board, Cross is a way, especially if you don't have any traps but you still have an extra way to get to Sarah. This is another way to get you a trap on board to trigger the Sarah on the following turn. The second piece of synergy I want to talk about is between Ancient Fairy Dragon and Aromaseraphy Jasmine. So what this basically means is if you do your full combo and have Jasmine and you still have the Ancient Fairy Dragon on the field as well, you can wait, save the AFD effect to pop the field spell, gain 1,000, and then you can trigger Jasmine's secondary effect, which is that when you gain life points, you can add a plant monster from your deck to your hand. So if they, for some reason, ash the Jasmine effect when you tribute to get a Lily from the deck, you can still use that effect to then hard search a Lily example, or just any other Traptrix name that happens to be a plant, and then you could special summon that name off of Ancient Fairy Dragon. So there's just a lot of utility there, and kind of really makes you be able to use the full capacity of Jasmine, because we weren't ever really using the gain effect. Now you have a way to do that as well, so that's really, really important. Okay, and then I want to talk about the utility of just Ancient Fairy Dragon itself. It does have the second ability, in addition to searching the field spell, to special any level 4 or lower monster from your hand that is able to get stuff like your Traptrix and then trigger their special summon effect, like Mermelio's mandatory to pop a back row, whether there's one there or not, to help trigger Sarah, Pudica as spot removal, Dianea to reset. So you have so much utility in getting an extra body on board for hands that might be a little bit more clunky, where you open a lot of Traptrix monsters. Just something to be aware of there. The second piece of utility is, again, it acts as a really insane bridge to any piece that you're missing in terms of field spells, right? Again, mine of choice are the Traptrix field spell, of course, the Therian field spell, and then one Dragon Ravine. In a perfect world, I would kind of recommend changing the engine a little bit to do either 2 to 3 Destrudo plus 1 Dragon Ravine. I don't think Fairy Ant is as good initially after doing some more testing. I think Destrudo is just better since you can kind of shotgun it whenever. You don't really have to do as much grave setup for a card like Fairy Ant, and it just really, I think, helps a little bit more and goes back into the deck to have more utility. But this is an easy bridge, so if you start with the Traptrix field spell, you can obviously do that if you need to. Otherwise, vice versa, you can go from the Therian to the Traptrix, or if you start with the Destrudo through Dragon Ravine, you just have an easy access to either of these. The other thing I'll note too is that you can utilize 2 summons off of the AFD in the Traptrix field spell. If this was what you searched from Ancient Fairy Dragon, you can special a name with AFD and then use the field spell, get rid of the AFD, and bring back another Traptrix name from your grave, and then you still have 2 more level 4s and you can keep playing there. So there's just a lot of utility in different niche circumstances where this comes up like almost every game. It's really powerful. Okay, and the last piece of utility I want to address around the Synchro engine is probably going to be the biggest question is, what if I don't have a field spell, or what if my way to my field spell gets stopped? Then what's the point of these useless cards in my deck? Well, there is a lot more utility, and that came out of Photon Hypernova, believe it or not, as a common. This has popped up a little bit back and forth, I think, in the group on Facebook, but Circle of the Fairies is actually an insane level 7 Synchro that can be utilized, has an effect that lets you normal summon 1 insect or plant in addition to your regular normal summon. So it's literally just double summon for free. That's an extra body that allows you to link climb. That is a plant that still lets you get into the Jasmine line and all that good stuff. So a really easy example of that is if you want to lead in a hand where you do unfortunately say open all Traptrix monsters, but none of them are Arachnocampa, or you have some random traps that just aren't usable at that time, or whatever it is, you just have an awkward hand where your only play is a normal summon. Destrudo really does help fix that immensely. So the example would be, say, you want to get to the Arachnocampa by summoning the Mantis. They hit that with either an Ash, an Imperm, whatever, Veiler. You can then simply go ahead, summon the Destrudo, synchro those 2 off into Circle of the Fairies. Circle of the Fairies then gives you an extra normal summon, to which you could either do Pudica or Dianea. Dianea is going to get you a body back, or Pudica is going to get you the field spell, which then gets you Dianea. And then Dionea is going to be another normal summon thanks to the field spell that Pudica got. And then Dionea gets another name back. And then you're like just perfectly fine here, and you have an insane board already. And now you're perfectly set up to overlay 2 of these into a Strenna, and then getting rid of the other 2 into Jasmine, and then still being able to do a full combo from there. So that's a bit about kind of the general math behind the deck. That's a little bit about the basic interactions and utility with it. I'll reference and say the original deck profile has a pretty solid test hand that gives a basic understanding of how the deck functions. I will go ahead and do one more test hand here live to showcase to all of you. Okay, and then like I said, I wanted to showcase a test hand here at the end to kind of showcase how you can utilize the Synchro engine. I'm leaving Destrudo out so you don't have to sit here and watch me shuffle a billion times to try to draw the Destrudo. I'm going to put it here and draw 4 cards to just say, if you hit that, how are you using the Synchro engine? So we have Destrudo, Shade, Lily, Myrmelio, and a Prosperity. This is all really, really good. And I think this will be a really good example. So what we will go ahead and do is we will go ahead and start with the normal summon of the Myrmelio, use the Myrmelio effect, and we can go ahead and add any trap. I'm going to add the whole Utea just on the off chance that we hit a trap hole off the Prosperity. I think that's what I would like to do first. So then we can go ahead, use that Prosperity, look at the top 6 by banishing a few different things. Again, I prioritize this a little differently. I kind of want to be greedy and go for Ancient Fairy Dragon, so I'm going to showcase what I would do in that instance. I would get rid of just at least 1 Sarah. You got to make sure you keep at least 1 to 2 left. I would go ahead and get rid of the Link 3, our rank 4 Searcher. And then I don't think we need to prioritize the theory and stuff just because, again, we already have a Lily in rotation. So you can get away with getting rid of Sargus and Merrymaker. And then last, I would get rid of Circle of the Fairies. If you want to keep that in rotation just to be safe, and I'll talk about it if it comes up, and we don't hit the field spell, that you would obviously just swap this out with AFD or just something else. You typically want to keep both of these in here, but for the sake of this example, I like prioritizing AFD. But if we have an example where this comes up, I will showcase that as well. So we'll get rid of those 6 face down. And then we'll look at the top 6. So we have Evenly Matched, Cross, Mantis, Prosperity, Whole Utea, and Evenly Matched. So in this case, I think I'm going to just get Whole Utea just because that gives us more bodies on board and can be reset one of them with the Dionea. I'm shuffling, but of course we're going to go right back into the deck. So what we'll go ahead and do is link off the Myrmelio into a copy of Sarah. And then from there, what we can go ahead and do is activate the Shade ahead of time. I'm not going to trigger Sarah here on this instance. I want to wait and save it for the whole Utea. Discard the whole Utea. And then what we will go ahead and do is try to keep this a little bit visible. I know it's a little hard there. Apologies on that. We'll slide stuff back just a little bit. But what we can then do is trigger the Sarah from the second whole Utea. That will then get us a copy of Dionea to set the other whole Utea. So we'll go ahead and do all of that. And then from here, we can do a few different things. What I'm really thinking of is how we can effectively get a plant engrave here. And so what I'm going to do first is we're going to go ahead and link the Sarah and the, well, we'll just be safe again, cover ourselves from nib as best as possible, even if we've already done our 5 summons, so to speak. We'll go ahead and make the Strenna. And then obviously we'll go ahead and link these. We already have Strenna on board. I'm going to go ahead and preemptively special the Destrudo now, putting that there, paying the 4K. Then we'll go ahead and link these 2 off into a copy of our Jasmine. And then before we proceed, I'm going to go ahead and use the Strenna, detaching a whole Utea to add back a Dionea from our grave to our hand. And then we have a few different things we can do here. So what I'm actually going to do is, now that Destrudo's on the board, I'm going to go ahead and special the Lily, just because we have a plant in the grave to equip with Sarah. And then we can send, let's go ahead and send just the Lily to get a copy of Disc Coliseum. So we'll go ahead and get that Disc Coliseum here, and then we will activate it and use that effect to then get a copy of Regulus. And then we can go ahead, special the Regulus, use its effect, equip the Lily. And now what we can go ahead and do is Jasmine tribute off the Strenna to get any plant. It does not have to always be Lily, just want to emphasize that. So in this case, I think we kind of want to get a copy of Pudica, but it can really be any Traptrix plant, but because we don't have Pudica in rotation, that's kind of what I'm going to go for here. And then what we're going to do is not use the Pudica effect, and we will go ahead and synchro with the Destrudo and the Pudica. Destrudo will go to the bottom of the deck, and then that will get us a copy of our Ancient Fairy Dragon. And now what we can go ahead and do, like I mentioned before, is use AFD, pop the Disc Coliseum, gain another 1,000 life points back, to then go ahead and search a different field spell, which in case will be the Traptrix field spell. So we'll go ahead and add that to our hand. And then what we can do is, since we gained life points, we can use Jasmine's effect to search another plant from our deck to our hand. So you could get an extra Lily if you want, since we've actually not used the summon effect. But again, the search effect is that once per turn, so we can't get the cross here. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is just add a second Dionea for follow-up. Since we have an extra normal summon now off that Traptrix field spell, we can go ahead and use one of them and keep one of them. So what we'll go ahead and do now is normal the Dionea. Well, we need to activate the field spell first, right? Go ahead, put that there, then normal summon the Dionea. Use the Dionea's effect to bring back another Traptrix monster. Could be anything. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and bring back the Myrmelio. And then from here, what I'm going to do is I want to keep as much on board as possible. So we'll overlay these two, and we'll go for a copy of Rafflesia. So we'll go ahead and make that. And oh, by the way, we forgot to get our Strenna. I'm sure someone has already commented before I've even noticed, but that was the whole point of tributing Strenna off Jasmine. So there, that is now corrected. That should look nice and neat. We have the Hyperton live here. But then we'll go ahead, overlay these two into a copy of Rafflesia. And then from there, what we can go ahead and do is we can do a couple different things here. We can link climb, we can, keep going, but I'm going to make something a little bit more simpler. I'm just going to go ahead and use the other effect of Traptrix Garden to banish a card and then bring back something. In this case, I'm not sure what I want to get rid of. I think it can just be... we can just get rid of the Jasmine. You don't have to, or you could keep the Ancient Fairy Dragon, whichever one you want. Banish that up there. To then bring back, I think we can just go straight for Sarah. I believe our garden just says any Traptrix monster that is in your grave. Yep, and that was properly summoned, so we're good to go with that. And then we keep the Dionea for follow-up. So this is an example of how it bridges. I know it was a little clunky. There's a lot going on in my brain, and you can tell there's a lot going on in this deck, but that's the idea, right? So you have an Omni Negate, you have a Monster Negate, or whatever else, depending on whatever you activate on that same turn. You have another disruption in the form of Rafflesia. You have another trigger in the form of Sarah to get you a card like Pudica. In reality, if you really want to focus on Pudica, the best bet would then to be banish Ancient Fairy Dragon, just so you have a main monster zone opened up. If you don't want to, you want to make sure you prioritize Pudica, then you can keep the Jasmine there as an example. But overall, that's the idea of how the deck functions, the math behind it, the utility between Ancient Fairies, Circle of Fairies. Really, really powerful. I highly recommend trying it. Again, a couple Destrudo, 2 to 3 of those, and then a Dragon Ravine will take you quite a long way. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Later.